The room was quiet, too quiet for Jenny's comfort. The heavy curtains blocked out most of the daylight, leaving the space dim, lit only by the pale glow of a few lamps. The air carried the scent of polished wood and fading flowers. At the center of the room stood the coffin, surrounded by bouquets that already looked tired, as if even the roses felt the weight of sorrow. Jenny sat toward the side, her back straight, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She kept her eyes on the floor, not daring to look at the faces staring in her direction. She could feel their judgment without a single word. Every whisper, every sideways glance carried the same cruel message. She doesn't belong here. She won't get anything. Her brother, Thomas, had positioned himself in the very front, shoulders back, chin lifted. He greeted relatives with a confident handshake, his expression calm but proud. He didn't look like a grieving son. He looked like a man ready to step into a fortune. Dad always said I'd inherit everything. He spoke loudly enough for others to hear. $5 million. It's all mine. The number hung in the air like a storm cloud. 5 million. It rolled off tongues in hushed conversations. It passed between cousins and aunts like gossip too delicious to keep quiet. No one spoke to Jenny. No one asked her how she was coping. Her throat tightened. She remembered the long nights spent by her father's side, bringing him water, adjusting his blanket, listening when his voice was too weak to carry more than a whisper. Thomas hadn't been there. He had excuses, meetings, trips, always something more important than their father. And yet now, everyone acted as if Jenny was invisible. Poor girl. She'll walk away with nothing. Thomas deserves it all. Jenny's fingers curled into fists against her dress. She wanted to turn, to shout the truth in their faces, that she had been the one who cared, who stayed, who sacrificed. But the words stayed locked inside her. Her silence felt like a cage. The ceremony dragged on, but the room wasn't filled with mourning. It was filled with speculation, with greed disguised as sympathy. Thomas played his part well, the strong son, the heir everyone admired. He nodded gravely, his lips pressed in a line, but Jenny noticed the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes every time someone mentioned the inheritance. His aunt leaned closer, her voice dripping with condescension. "Don't be upset, dear," she said softly, though loud enough for others to hear. "Your brother is the rightful heir. That's just how it is." Jenny's jaw tightened. Just how it is? As if her blood didn't run through the same veins? As if she wasn't her father's child too? The words stung more than she wanted to admit. When the final words were spoken, people began to stand, murmuring as they drifted toward the exit. Jenny stayed seated, her eyes locked on the coffin. The brass plaque caught the dim light, and she could almost hear her father's voice again, the calm reassurance he always gave her when life felt unbearable. "They think you left me nothing," she whispered under her breath, her lips trembling. "But I know you, Dad. You wouldn't do that to me." For a moment, she allowed herself to believe he was still there beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, steady and warm. The thought gave her strength. Thomas's laugh echoed from the hallway. $5 million, he boasted again, this time louder. "It's all mine." Jenny rose slowly, smoothing the fabric of her dress, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She walked toward the coffin, ignoring the sideways glances that followed her. Placing her hand gently on the polished wood, she whispered so only she could hear, "They'll see the truth, Dad. I'll make sure of it." With that, she turned and walked out, her step steady, despite the whispers chasing after her. Humiliation burned in her chest, but beneath it, a spark of determination had been lit. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.
The hall began to empty, but the whispers refused to die. Every group that lingered at the doorway seemed to circle back to the same number, the same phrase, the same name. 5 million. Thomas stood near the back, pretending to be invisible, though she knew every word was meant for her ears. $5 million, one cousin muttered with a grin. Thomas won the lottery of life. He was always father's favorite, another chimed in. Jennie never stood a chance. Their voices were needles in her skin. She tried to breathe, to calm herself, but the injustice pressed against her ribs until she thought she might break. Thomas thrived in the attention. He shook hands like a politician, his smile wide, his posture proud. "Father trusted me with everything," he declared. "It was always clear I'd inherit. Jennie knows that." The words sliced through her. He wasn't even hiding his arrogance anymore. He wanted her to hear it. Jennie remembered the endless nights that she had sat beside their father, spoon-feeding him soup when his hands shook too much to hold the bowl. She remembered washing the dishes, paying bills, keeping the house from collapsing under the weight of illness. Thomas had been absent. He had sent short messages once in a while, busy at work, can't make it, but no real effort. And now he stood before their family as if he were the golden child, draped in a crown of lies. Jennie's aunt approached again, the same sharp perfume trailing behind her. "Jennie, don't make this harder on yourself," she said in a low, patronizing voice. $5 million is not for you to dream about. Accept it. Thomas will take care of everything." Jennie forced a smile, though it felt brittle on her lips. "Like he always has?" she asked quietly. The aunt stiffened, caught off guard, but quickly recovered. "Respect, dear. Respect for tradition." Jennie turned away, unwilling to waste another breath on someone who saw her only as an afterthought. As she stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, the contrast hit her. The sky was vast and pale, yet it felt heavy, weighed down by the shadow of those words. 5 million. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being erased, about the narrative they had built around her, that she was insignificant, unworthy, invisible. Thomas's laughter rang out again from across the courtyard. He stood with a small crowd around him, animated, his voice carrying above the rest. "I'll make sure Father's legacy grows. He always said I had the mind for business. That's why I get it all." Jennie clenched her jaw. She wanted to march over, to shout the truth, that their father had whispered different words to her in those final days, words filled with regret, with promises, with secrets he said only she could understand. But not yet. Instead, Jennie turned away, her steps measured. She knew that soon the lawyer would arrive, the will would be read, and all of these people so quick to dismiss her would finally face something they hadn't expected. And as much as it hurt to be dismissed now, Jennie carried one truth inside her chest like a hidden weapon. Her father had not forgotten her. She could feel it. The air in the hall shifted when the doors creaked open again. Conversations hushed, footsteps slowed, and every head turned toward the tall man who stepped inside carrying a leather briefcase. His dark suit was perfectly pressed, his expression calm and unreadable. Jennie recognized him instantly. Mr. Clark, her father's lawyer for more than 2 decades. She remembered seeing him at the house many times, his visits always serious, his words always chosen carefully. He was a man who spoke only when necessary, and when he did, people listened. Thomas straightened, his chest swelling with pride. "Finally," he muttered, loud enough for Jennie to hear. "Let's make this official." The lawyer walked slowly to the front of the room, setting his briefcase on a polished wooden table near the coffin. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the crowd of eager faces. "Thank you all for waiting," he said in a steady voice. "As requested, the reading of Mr. Harrison's will shall take place here today." A wave of murmurs rippled through the family. Chairs scraped against the floor as people hurried to find seats again. Jennie remained standing near the side, her hands folded, heart racing. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes pressing down on her, but none were warm, none offered comfort. Thomas took the seat directly in front of the lawyer, flashing a confident smile. "We all know how this will go. My father was a man of clarity. He didn't leave room for surprises." Jennie's stomach twisted. She could hear the smugness in his voice, see the way his shoulders squared like a king awaiting his crown. Mr. Clark opened the briefcase with deliberate slowness, pulling out a thick envelope sealed with wax. He held it up for everyone to see before carefully breaking the seal. The room fell into silence, so complete Jennie could hear her own heartbeat. The lawyer unfolded the papers and cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of Mr. Richard Harrison," he began. His voice was calm, measured, but each word carried weight. "Dated 6 months prior to his passing." Jennie's breath caught. 6 months ago, she remembered that time well. Her father had been weak but lucid. He had asked her questions late at night, looked at her with a depth that unsettled her. She had wondered what was on his mind. Now she knew. "First and foremost, a sum of $5 million is hereby allocated to my son, Thomas Harrison." Gasps erupted in the room. Relatives nodded knowingly, exchanging looks that said, "We told you so." Thomas grinned, sitting taller, his eyes sweeping the room as though he had just been crowned. But the lawyer did not stop reading. He paused briefly, and when he continued, his voice seemed sharper, clearer. "However," the single word sliced through the air like a knife. Every head turned back to the front. Thomas's grin faltered. Jennie felt her chest tighten. Mr. Clark looked down at the papers, then directly at Jennie. "Before my son may receive this inheritance, there is another matter that must be addressed. I have entrusted my daughter, Jennie, with something that must be revealed today." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennie's pulse thundered in her ears. Dozens of eyes turned toward her, no longer dismissive, but wide with shock and curiosity. Thomas shifted in his seat, his face paling. "What is this supposed to mean?" he demanded, his voice cracking. The lawyer closed the folder gently, his gaze firm. "It means that your father had a secret, one that only Jennie can bring to light."
The lawyer's words hung in the air like thunder after a lightning strike. Jennie's breath caught in her throat. Dozens of eyes turned toward her, sharp, curious, some even angry, as though she had no right to be mentioned in the same breath as the inheritance. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her posture straight, refusing to show weakness. Thomas shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous," he barked, pointing a finger at Jennie. "My father always said the money was mine, all of it. What trick is this?" Mr. Clark remained calm, his tone steady as stone. "I am reading directly from your father's words. If you have objections, you may keep them until I am finished." The room silenced again. The lawyer glanced at the pages and continued. "It is true," he read aloud, "that I leave a sum of $5 million to my son, Thomas Harrison. However, before this money may be released, he must acknowledge and confront the truth I entrusted to my daughter, Jennie." A collective gasp swept through the relatives. Whispers broke out immediately. What truth? Why would he say that? Did Jennie know something? Jennie felt her pulse hammering in her ears. She didn't know exactly what her father had written, but she remembered the long nights, the way he looked at her with heavy eyes as though he wanted to tell her more, but didn't have the strength. Thomas slammed his hand against the table, making the glasses rattle. "This is nonsense," he barked, pointing a finger at Jennie. "My father always said the money was mine, all of it. What trick is this?" Mr. Clark remained calm, his tone steady as stone. "Sit down, Thomas." His tone was so firm, so commanding, that even Thomas hesitated before reluctantly lowering himself back into the chair. The lawyer resumed. "I have written a personal letter for Jennie, and only she may read it.
Within that letter is the truth I speak of. Until Jennie has revealed it, Thomas cannot receive his inheritance." The hall erupted. Voices clashed, relatives leaned toward each other, hands covered mouths in shock. Jennie's aunt muttered, "Impossible! What could he have meant?" Jennie's heart pounded harder with every passing second. She felt the weight of every gaze on her, as if the entire family wanted to pull the answer from her lips, but she had none to give. Yet. Thomas's face flushed red with fury. "A letter? To her? This is some trick! Father would never do this to me!" But even as he spoke, doubt flickered in his eyes. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Mr. Clark reached back into his briefcase and carefully pulled out a sealed envelope. He held it in his hand for a moment, then turned toward Jennie. "This letter belongs to you," he said firmly. "Your father left it with strict instructions. You must be the one to read it." Jennie's throat tightened as she stepped forward. Every step felt heavy, the whispers rising like waves crashing against her. She reached out with trembling fingers and took the envelope. The paper felt warm against her skin, as though it carried the very breath of her father. On the front, written in his shaky handwriting, were the words, "For Jennie. Only you will know the truth." The room went silent again. Thomas's voice sliced through the air, desperate and sharp. "Open it now! Let's end this nonsense!" Jennie clutched the envelope to her chest, her eyes burning. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a small, steady smile. This wasn't nonsense. This was her father's final voice, and it was meant for her alone. Jennie stood frozen, the envelope clutched in her hand. The room felt smaller now, every breath heavier, as if the walls themselves leaned closer to witness the moment. Her family stared at her, some with disbelief, others with barely concealed contempt. Thomas's voice cut through the silence, sharp and impatient. "Open it. Do it now. Let everyone see there's nothing inside. Just Father's pity for you." Jennie didn't flinch. With steady hands, she slid a finger under the seal and carefully broke it. The paper tore softly, but the sound echoed like thunder in the tense room. She unfolded the letter slowly, her eyes scanning the handwriting she knew so well. Her father's words leapt from the page, trembling yet strong. "My dearest Jennie, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and the truth must finally be known. You were the one who stayed by my side, the one who cared for me when my body failed and the nights grew long. You gave me dignity when others turned away. For that, my gratitude is eternal." Jennie's throat tightened. The room seemed to vanish around her as she heard her father's voice in every word. "There is something your brother never told you. When I was weak, he betrayed me. He used my name and my trust to sign away property that was not his. He sought to take everything before I was even gone. He lied to me, Jennie. But I discovered the truth, and I could not let it stand." Gasps rippled through the family. Jennie's eyes darted across the room, catching glimpses of shock, suspicion, and whispers growing louder. She continued reading, her voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. "To protect you, I placed certain assets in your name alone. Our family's second house by the lake, and the account I never mentioned to anyone else. They're yours, Jennie, because you earned my trust when others broke it. You must not let them feel unworthy. You are my daughter. You carry my heart, my name, and now my legacy." Tears blurred Jennie's vision. She pressed her lips together, steadying her breathing before lowering the letter. For a moment, the room was silent, stunned into stillness. Thomas's face was pale, his mouth open, but no words forming. His hands trembled on the armrest of his chair. Finally, he managed to choke out, "That's a lie. He would never say that." But the panic in his eyes betrayed him. The relatives looked at him differently now, suspicion creeping into their stares. Mr. Clark's voice was calm but firm. "This letter was entrusted to me personally in your father's presence. It is authentic, and as the will states, the $5 million cannot be released until this truth is acknowledged." The whispers erupted into chaos. She gets the house? And an account? Thomas lied? Jennie stood tall, folding the letter back into its envelope. She felt the sting of their stares, But for the first time, she wasn't ashamed. She wasn't invisible. She was her father's chosen voice. She looked directly at Thomas, her voice steady and clear. "You thought you could erase me, but Father saw everything, and now so does everyone else." His jaw tightened, fury burning in his eyes. But there was nothing he could say. The truth had been spoken, and it carried more weight than his arrogance ever could. The room was no longer filled with quiet whispers. It roared with arguments, disbelief, and gasps. Relatives leaned closer to one another, their voices sharp and frantic. The words house, account, betrayal bounced off the walls, carried like sparks in dry air. Jennie stood still, clutching the envelope to her chest. For the first time that day, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. Thomas rose to his feet, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. His face was crimson, his voice shaking with rage. "This doesn't prove anything. She forged it. This is some trick to humiliate me." But no one echoed his accusation. Eyes that once looked at Jennie with disdain now turned toward him with suspicion. His certainty, his pride, his arrogance, it was all crumbling. Mr. Clark adjusted his glasses, his tone cutting through the chaos. "This letter is authentic. I witnessed your father write and seal it. I warned you, Thomas, that pride has consequences. Your father wanted this moment to be remembered." The crowd silenced, the weight of his words pulling everyone back into stillness. Jennie stepped forward, her hands still trembling, though her voice was steady. "I don't want your money, Thomas," she said, meeting her brother's furious gaze. "I want the truth to stand. Father trusted me because I was there. You left him alone when he needed you most. That's what he remembered." Her words landed like stones in a still pond, rippling through the family. An aunt who had mocked her earlier shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Jennie's eyes. A cousin whispered, "She's right. She was always the one caring for him." Thomas clenched his fists, his eyes darting around the room, searching for someone to defend him, but no one spoke. His power had vanished. Jennie turned back toward the coffin, her eyes softening. She placed the envelope gently on top of it, whispering so only she could hear, "Thank you, Dad. You gave me back my voice." A wave of calm washed over her. The humiliation, the whispers, the laughter, all of it melted away. She wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. She was the one who carried the truth. Mr. Clark cleared his throat one final time. "Until this matter is resolved, the $5 million will remain locked. But your father's decisions stand. Jennie inherits the lake house and the account in her name. That is not subject to dispute." Gasps filled the air once more, but Jennie didn't flinch. For the first time, she didn't care what they thought. She turned to leave, her steps slow but steady. Every eye followed her, but the weight of their judgment no longer pressed on her shoulders. Instead, she carried something far heavier and far more precious, her father's trust. At the doorway, she paused. The hall behind her buzzed with confusion, anger, disbelief. But none of it mattered. Jennie's voice was quiet but firm, carrying across the room like a final verdict. Money fades. Truth remains. And today, the truth belongs to me. Then she walked out into the open air, the shadow of $5 million finally lifting, replaced by something brighter, her father's love and the strength she had always carried within herself.